We've seen the same thing happen with Epstein with these scientists that we saw happen in Hollywood and we saw happen up on Wall Street in New York, where he starts spreading money around.
The scientist who's funded by Jeffrey Epstein is creating these interactive dolls that go into the bedroom of some little girl that records what she's saying, watches what she's doing, feeds this information back to some system somewhere, some mainframe. The fact that Epstein's behind it, you have to ask, what was the plan?
Okay, wow. That just kind of scared me, as well as give it up for little Sophia, everybody. Bye-bye. I love that.
And my guess is it represents some very powerful structure that we tripped over, that this was constructed. I mean, we have a very famous case of a guy named Eli Cohen, who was fitted with a backstory and became a playboy in Damascus and held orgies, if I understand correctly, where he collected information and leverage against people in the Syrian government. If you take that situation, this looks remarkably similar. We've got a guy who was apparently a math teacher at a private high school, and the next thing we know, he's avoided jail in some sort of financial scandal, and he's suddenly set up as a mystery financier with connections to absolutely everyone in the top echelons of power.
I know that Jeffrey was selling arms.
How do you know that?
Where the money comes from, nobody knows. If you want to get somebody in the show, you'll never get them, but Leslie Wexner, the fellow who owned the Limited and Victoria's Secret, and was very involved with Epstein in terms of business, as much as we know.
Okay, so he would know. He would know where
He knows some stuff. I mean, he had something to do with Epstein getting that 28,000 square foot apartment,
okay.
which I don't know. It seemed like Epstein never paid for it. How could we, since 2006, not pay any attention to the story?
When I met Jeffrey Epstein, which might have been something like 2002, before he was charged with sex crime violations in Florida, it was like somebody created a Gatsby-like character out of a Ralph Lauren look-alike who had apparently recently been a math teacher at a private high school. Nothing added up. I did not believe that Jeffrey Epstein was a hedge fund manager. And I, in fact, called my wife at the time and I said, this man appears to be a construct. And she said, what do you mean by a construct? I said, it's like they've hired an actor to play a hedge fund manager.
We did hear that today, apparently, President Trump had some sort of falling out with Epstein, but he didn't elaborate. We do know that he did kick him out of Mar-a-Lago at one point. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there are two incidents there. One was apparently there was a member and Epstein was inappropriate with the member's daughter. The other piece, and I interviewed a woman who would run the spa there, and I said, did you know Jeffrey Epstein? She said, oh, yes. She said, he used to come over to the spa, and I found him to be inappropriate with the girls, the young girls there. And she said, I went to Mr. Trump, and he threw him right out.
Epstein used blackmail to manipulate people. Maintaining a control file is a very old trick of the agencies and still used today. French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel has started agencies with Epstein, and both share a long history.
It's a me, Marcus. You are there for the purpose of somebody wanting to take you home to bed. He's got the agency, he's got the girls. His friends say, oh, Jean-Luc, I'd like to meet some girls, or we're having a party tonight. Can you bring some girls?
And what happens if you say no?
You don't work.
You actually have known that he has made someone pay a professional penalty for saying no.
I know, I paid a penalty for saying no.
But his usefulness eventually came to an end. Epstein and Jean-Luc both died in prison by suicide, allegedly.
If you want to save the nation, I think we need to investigate this thoroughly and hold people to account too. Do I think that's likely? No, I do not. No, I do not. Considering just how massive this story is and how many people would be indicted, and how many people would have their entire legacy destroyed by the revelations, it's because of that I do not think we will see any true accountability. One reason for this, and why this story is ignored by most mainstream media, is because Jeffrey Epstein's story opens a window to a whole world of corruption, a world so depraved, so dark, and so desolate, that many fear it threatens to destroy the entire nation. However, as stated, letting this go also destroys everything. We cannot let this go. We just can't. Under no circumstances are we to let this go. Now, once you get through all of the sinister sex trafficking and blackmail aspects to the story, yes, the undercurrent of this tale of corruption revolves around financial crime, pay-to-play schemes, and conflicting operations between various world governments. Yes, they were all in on this, but one thing that has not been examined completely are the financial crimes related to politics. The Epstein case opens the door to all of that being revealed, which is why no one wants it though. Yes, even recently, I've heard Epstein being described as a Rosetta Stone for world corruption. He unlocks a door to the whole thing. So the Epstein case is very complicated, and there's a lot of connections to make, a lot of dense research. So basically, we're going to kinda meander around this topic a bit, because I just want to refresh my memory a little and try to work through a few questions I have. Anyway, we have to get to the bottom of this. And to really wrap our heads around how important this story is, we have to go back in time. Yes, this all ties into the issues with rogue intel agencies. All of this started in Prohibition with honeypot schemes. The mob would get compromising info on politicians or whoever, and would then blackmail them into letting things slide. Well, the government saw how effective this was, and really, I'm sure it goes back deeper, but we'll stick with this for now. Anyway, during World War II, the OSS was created, and the OSS was the original name for what became the CIA. Anyway, the newly formed intel agency was engaged in blackmail schemes, working directly with the mob in some cases, and this strategy never really changed. Now, this all really ramped up with operations being conducted and justified out of quote-unquote wartime necessity, fighting the Nazis. However, it never ended. They've been rogue for a long time. From there, of course, we know that J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailed by the mob, and then again, this reinforced how effective this was. And from there, he started to do the same exact thing, Hoover's secret files. You see, the CIA and the FBI have been engaged in this behavior since the beginning. We are just now realizing to what extent. Okay, but in reality, Jeffrey Epstein is often touted as the mastermind. However, I do not think that's entirely accurate. Based on what I have researched, this is far more common than most want to admit, and Epstein wasn't especially special. He was more of a middle management guy, a cog in the machine, and that realization alone is probably more upsetting than most would like to admit, or perhaps that's why they do not look into it. Can you imagine reading all of the horrific things that Epstein and his pals did to innocent young women, girls really, and then finding out that that's not even the worst part. The worst part is the extent to which it happens, how many leaders are involved, and how often it happens. It still happens. We just do not know who the quote-unquote new Epstein is. Someone took his place. They didn't just stop. Anyway, Epstein was directly tied to intel agencies. For example, we have this guy, Alex Acosta, who said, and I quote, one of the reasons he was pressured into giving Jeffrey Epstein his first sweetheart deal was because he was directly told, and I quote, that Epstein belonged to intelligence. Now, was he on the payroll? Was he just an asset? And which intel agencies? We don't know. I mean, look, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of sex trafficking. To nobody. They won't release the names on that list. This goes back so far and runs so deep that it's kind of hard to articulate in succinct fashion. But let's give it a shot. Okay, so Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, was running the same blackmail schemes for Mossad. He had ties to the Eastern Bloc, the KGB, and he worked with various world governments on these types of operations. Robert Maxwell played a big role in one particular scandal to sell bug software to nuclear agencies in the US. It had a backdoor in it, and through the bug software, he sold out American secrets to various world governments. He sold our national nuclear secrets. Of course, Robert Maxwell was also involved with aspects to Iran-Contra, which of course involved US intel agencies. And again, Iran-Contra is also tied to the Clintons, and we might get into that. However, let's move on. So there is one problem when you're doing all that sketchy shit. Well, you end up dead eventually. And that's exactly what happened to Robert Maxwell. According to Ghislaine Maxwell herself, she claims that her father was murdered by rogue Mossad agents and an Italian crime syndicate. Just to refresh your memory, he was found dead off his yacht in 1991. Okay. Anyway, we know that Roy Cohn was the Epstein-Robert Maxwell figure in the US. He was running blackmail operations for US-based intel agencies, hell, from the late 60s onward. So, could Robert Maxwell have been talking with Epstein because he was trying to move into the quote-unquote US market for intel-based blackmail operations? I don't know. The timing is questionable. So, Roy Cohn died in 1986. Epstein starts to show up at Robert Maxwell's office in the UK during that same time period. Now, it is kind of hard to track down, but Epstein at the time was active in the UK. He was actually being mentored by a British arms dealer named Douglas Leese with British intelligence connections. And from there, of course, Robert Maxwell is killed in 1991. And then right after that, Ghislaine and Epstein take over. And it's not only to assume Robert Maxwell's operations, but they move in and take over for Roy Cohn as well. The fact remains, this is how deep this stuff goes. The rogue elements of our country run deep. Again, I think I bit off a bit more than I could chew with this video. But keep in mind, these influence operations have been around forever and are more insane today. With agencies like the NSA listening and recording to all your interactions, if you are a politician, they will find a way to manage you. They will get some dirt on you. And I just don't know how so many people have a tough time understanding this. However, it could just be cognitive dissonance. Maybe it's just too effed up for people to accept. And okay, maybe I'm getting too deep into the weeds here on the Epstein stuff, and I'll just have to do another video on it. But really my point is that intel agencies, certain political families, US oligarchs, and politicians who were involved with the Epstein scandal are still in power and are working towards their vision, their agenda, which we could debate. Some believe it's all business, selling out the United States based on their greed, which could certainly be true. But I also feel like there is an ideological tint to it as well. The same exact people involved with these aspects of corruption are involved in politics today. And really, many of these same individuals are now perpetuating this global World Economic Forum vision in order for our country to survive. Or if we are going to hop off this authoritarian trajectory, the main thing we need to do is root out corruption. One of the best ways to do this would be investigating the Epstein case and holding everyone to account. The Epstein case connects intel agencies with the mob. It connects to Iran-Contra via Robert Maxwell. The corrupt Iran-Contra guys are connected to Chinagate. And just to refresh your memory, Bill Clinton was selling China our military tech for campaign contributions. The Clinton-Chinagate scandal was run by Mark Middleton, the guy who was setting up the Epstein White House visits. And of course, Mark Middleton was the guy that was found dead hanging in a tree with a shotgun blast to the chest. Yes, he was the one running Chinagate and Epstein to Bill Clinton. Anyway, the Epstein case connects to various financial crimes, political corruption, and ties political figures to corrupt businessmen like Leslie Wexner. If we start pulling these threads and have real investigations, we will uncover a vast network of political corruption and depraved violent crime. However, as John McCain's wife said, and I quote, "We all knew about what Epstein was doing," end of quote. Yes, high-level government officials, politicians, DC insiders, they know what the truth is. And we've talked about it quite a bit. But the intel agencies are just running protection for these corrupt individuals and act as the cleanup squad, hiding all of their dirty secrets from prying eyes. And now we are seeing them directly attack political opponents of the regime. We have no choice. We need to rein in these intel agencies. The point to all of that was to highlight just how deep the corruption goes and how dark that thread can get. The Epstein case is a microcosm of various political corruption schemes. It's a door to it all. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.